Today I'm going to be talking about aging and our attitudes about aging. Not only what the attitudes out in the general consensus are, but our own personal attitudes about aging. The title of the show today is the rage against age and our healing or ending our internal war. That internal war part, that might be a new concept that you haven't considered. I'll explain what that means. We all know that in this world, which is pretty much a chauvinistic world, people are supposed to look a certain way and act a certain way, and the more youthful, the better. So it's like there's this inherent bias against aging. We grow up with that. We grow up with those messages bombarding us from the media, from all sources. When we're kids, we hear about old people and almost have a view that anybody over a certain age, maybe 30, is an old person. And then when we're teenagers, especially, with the arrogance of just being a teenager, we have an attitude that younger is better. So those parts of us, the inner child, the inner adolescent, which remain a part of us as we become adults, those parts are still holding those same beliefs and attitudes about aging. But the dilemma is, because we are human beings and aging is part of the deal in the lifetime you're living, unless you die early, you're going to be aging. How gracefully you age depends on these beliefs and attitudes that you have about yourself and aging. So the war comes about when the parts of you, the inner child, the inner adolescent, are in conflict because they believe younger is better. They're in conflict with this natural occurrence that happens to us, which is aging. And if we're not aware of this conflict, if we're not aware of this war and actually make peace with it, that war can manifest as illness or many other things. Illness including Alzheimer's or physical ailments. So it's really important to maybe take time and look in the mirror and own the fact that there's a part of you that holds that being younger is better, and then the other part of you which is aging on its own. All the facelifts, all of the fitness memberships and the miracle tonics are not going to end the aging process. Death will do that, but that's not a preferable alternative to aging. So to make peace with it, to accept it, to age gracefully, and understand that chronological age is just a number. It truly is just a number. How you feel on the inside, how youthful your spirit is, that's what is important here, because that also sets a resonance. If you see life as an adventure, as fun, and if you take responsibility for creating the life you want, and if you have problems, finding out what you need to change within yourself so that you can alleviate those problems. That's how you can adjust your attitude, change your attitude about life and about yourself, and make it really a joyful experience all the way to the end. I, being a woman who for a long time was programmed and accepted those beliefs about looking a certain way and acting a certain way, made me more desirable, and that had to do with being younger too. I've had to deal with this on a very personal level, and it's an ongoing process. The older I get, the more I need to look at it. I was doing some work on this subject for myself a couple of years ago. At the time, I had a number of friends who were quite a bit younger than I, and we got along just great, but I hit a birthday in the 60s, and I was going through all this inner turmoil. So as I was delving into myself and seeing what beliefs I had been carrying with me that were limiting my enjoyment of my life and limiting my acceptance of getting older, I was coming up with some of the old beliefs and the fears and things, processing those as I know how to do. And by the way, I wrote a book a few years ago called A New Spirituality Beyond Religion. And in this book, I talk in detail how our beliefs and our attitudes, our thoughts and feelings really help to create our own reality and how we can change our reality. This book is available in libraries and stores. But getting back to my personal exploration that I was going through in a big time a few years ago when I was in the early 60s of my chronological age. One day I happened to notice that this crystal, which I have always loved and admired because of its beauty. It is so clear, and at the bottom it has what is called a phantom. I don't know if it's picking up on the camera or not, but it's quite a beautiful piece, and I had it sitting on a table. And I happened to glance at it one day, and I noticed it had a little chip in it. And at first I was horrified because this was absolutely perfect when I bought it. Really pristine and beautiful in that way. So I looked at the chip and I wondered, okay, what's the message to me? How did I allow this to happen? There was no logical reason for this crystal to get a chip in it. And what I realized, the insight that came to me was, just because this crystal has a little chip in it, it doesn't mean it's less beautiful or less valuable. And so I kind of related that to myself and the wrinkles and the other things that have happened over the years to really let it in that just because those things have occurred and are continuing to occur as I get older, it doesn't mean that my soul is less beautiful, that my spirit is less beautiful, that the human being that I am, and that we all are, is less beautiful. So that's really what's important. And more, I've tried to focus on that inner sort of beauty, the value of that. It's an interesting time in our world because the baby boomer generation, which is huge, those people are all now in their 50s. Well, let's say late 40s to early 60s, that range. And when that generation was in its youth, shall we say, in the 60s, why, it was all about being younger. I remember there was an expression, don't trust anyone over 35. So that sort of set the tone. And anybody older was blamed on the condition of the world. And so it was like, young is good, old is passé. Interesting concept for these baby boomers who are now in the late middle age range, who are having to come to peace with the fact that they are getting older and that they need to reconcile the earlier beliefs and the earlier attitudes with what is happening to them today. So I think that's what I'm talking about. It is meaningful for anyone, but especially the many who are in that baby boomer age group. There's a wonderful transformation that's taking place in this world. It's an evolution of consciousness, and it's an evolution of spirituality. And as people focus more on those aspects of who they are and less on the superficial aspects of being a human being, that can also help bring about this peace inside. We still, of course, are bombarded by the media and it's trying to sell us products to help us stay younger. Cosmetic surgery has increased. I'm sure it's at a higher rate than ever before. People have more money, can afford it, and it's sort of a common thing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying the motivations and the goals really need to be looked at for each person. The more peace that we can make with our human condition, the happier we're going to be. As I said in my book, I talk about many things, how we each create our own reality, but also about the changes that the world is going through. In the last chapter, I talk about how we really are, one of the options is to move into a new world, to really create a new world. And we have choices there. If we don't grow and change, the world we will create could be a nightmare world. It could be a mediocre world. And again, shifting our attitudes about what it is to be a human being and the true value of who we are as beings is so key to which reality, which world each of us will create for ourselves. If we keep it at a superficial level, if we say that being a human being mainly is looking good and attracting the sex that we prefer, opposite or otherwise, we're not paying attention to the more important parts of ourselves. We're not paying attention to the bigger aspects of our spirituality. We really are immortal. I believe and really know for myself that reincarnation is a fact. That we have many, many lifetimes. And we choose different lifetimes in order to learn about ourselves, to change what isn't working, to grow. Often we may live through a lifetime and not realize, not take responsibility that we've been creating the events and the circumstances we've experienced. So beyond the lifetime, when we're not physical anymore, we can look back on that lifetime and we could say, I see where maybe I could have done something a little differently here. So the higher truth about this is that one physical lifetime is just about that long. Even if you live to be 90 or 100, which is becoming more and more the case these days, it's still a minor blip on the screen. And if you can see yourself as a truly immortal being who lives on far beyond the physical lifetime, age is really inconsequential. I mean, the concept doesn't even exist beyond the physical world. So there's a lot of different things to think about and to delve into to help us come to peace with the aging process. Speaking of past lifetimes, and I realize that if reincarnation is not in your belief system, then this will probably sound bizarre and crazy and a bunch of new age mumbo jumbo. If you have a more open mind, perhaps you'll relate to this story. I was with a friend of mine who happened to be a channeled being, who actually has been a guest on this show in the past, talking about a number of issues I was dealing with for myself, including the age issue. And this being friend, Eleanor is her name, mentioned, she took a moment to kind of scan the energy, and she mentioned that I had had a lifetime in a much earlier civilization in Peru, where I had lived to be a very old woman who had really come to peace with her aging process and who was revered in her little town, her little community. And that lifetime, that being in that lifetime, have had what you could call a very healthy attitude about aging. And so Eleanor suggested that on my own, I delve into exploring that past lifetime. And I have tools and techniques that help me do that kind of inner work. It's kind of like a guided visualization or a meditation, where I actually did connect with that elderly woman in Peru, on the subconscious level, of course. And there was a way of communicating. No, I didn't hear voices in my head, but there was a communication of more of an intuitive nature between her and I. I asked what her name was, and she said Chala, C-H-A-L-A. So from time to time, I've used Chala as an ally for me to help me get a better perspective on myself and on my own relationship to the aging process. And the more I can own these things for myself, these higher truths about what it really, the importance of being a human being and spiritual being, and how less important it is what we look like, what I look like, really the happier I am. And interestingly enough, what I find is I have friends who range from mid-20s to 80s, 90s, because age really isn't that important in friendships. If you have something to say as a human being, if you have beliefs that are positive, that are worth sharing, if you have an interest in life and knowledge and a curiosity, that's what really piques other people's interest in you. And those are common topics that are far more meaningful, far more valuable than talking about your latest physical ailment or what new Botox procedure you're planning for yourself. If you wanted to see, getting back to this chauvinistic, shall we say, chauvinistic influence in society where men are superior to women, and women, in order to be valuable to men, are supposed to look a certain way and hopefully be young, because that'll prove you, the guy, you're young if you have a young chick on your arm, no matter what age you are. To kind of, as a caricature demonstration of that chauvinistic attitude, you can look at not only high fashion magazines where women are portrayed as so distorted, so excruciatingly thin that they're not even like human. Or another area where we're seeing this reflection back to us is in the male gay community. Certain transvestites who dress up as women and call themselves diva. I guess that's the sort of the stratosphere that they are presenting themselves in, with the tons of makeup and it's quite a caricature. It's quite a almost comical representation of what women are seen in the extreme in this chauvinistic paradigm. We are in the change of evolution, the change of consciousness is taking place. We are moving away from that extreme. Women are taking their power back. Women are finding self-respect more in their accomplishments, less in how they look. So these things are changing, but it's helpful to pay attention to what you see on television, what you see in the magazines and elsewhere in movies and so forth, and be conscious of what those messages are that are being portrayed, and then make a conscious choice for yourself as to what attitudes you want to have about yourself. I'm going to take a sip of water. Having fun, I think, is so much a part of having a joyful aging process. Learning to have fun at every stage in your life. I mean, when you were a kid, fun may have been playing in the sandbox, riding your bike, that sort of thing. When you were a teenager, fun may have been flirting with the boys or the girls, skateboarding, perhaps indulging in some beer drinking or even more dangerous activities. Anything that rebelled against the authority, rebelled against the status quo, is considered fun for many adolescents. Now the problem is that when we age, when we go into young adulthood, so often we don't find new ways of having fun. And so you can see people who are in grown-up bodies, maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, and they are still acting out in that adolescent way of having fun. It's still hanging out at the bar with the boys. It's still football games and video games. Not that those things are bad and wrong. It's just to take conscious awareness of how much time is being spent. It's helpful to find new ways to have fun at every stage in your life. And it's part of the adventure of living. You explore this and you explore that. So it's very important to be an older person in chronological years, but with that eternal youth spirit, the eternal curiosity, even the magical child part of you that can make every day an adventure. I really appreciate the attention that you've been paying to this show. Once again, the name of this show is Living Wisdom, and I'm Patty Paul. And I hope that you have time to view the show in the future. It's been my pleasure spending this time with you today. Thank you for watching.